Hello, darlings, and welcome to another episode with Stories with Scarlett. I have missed you all so much. I'm so glad to be back. And on today's episode, we are going to do two things. We're gonna unbox my very first Labubu. Yes, a Labubu. And we're gonna read a story from another new book. So let's get this going. All right, so I got a Labubu, and apparently these are really hard to find. I kind of just wanted to be a cool kid and finally get one for myself. And a couple weeks ago, I was at a local street fair here. That's one of my favorite things to do. I love going to street fairs and farmers markets. And there was a vendor there that happened to be selling legit Labubus. Apparently there are a lot of people that are creating fake versions of Labubu, and just there's like crazy reselling going on. Anyways, I'm not in that whole mix, but I did get my hands on a legit version, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and unbox my very first Labubu. That's what the box looks like. Yeah. And apparently they're all surprises. So there's different generations and you don't know which one you're getting until you open the box. So let's go ahead and do that. Ooh. I'm excited. I love surprises. If you couldn't tell from my other videos with some of the surprise bag unboxings and all that jazz. Okay. So let's set that to the side. All right, so here's its little like concealed bag. We don't know which one we're getting. Yeah, so I genuinely don't know any history or backstory on these little creatures at all. So feel free to educate me in the comments because I certainly have no clue about these little monsters. However, there is one thing I do know about them. So, they kind of have this very like sinister grin. They're kind of just like these little monster creatures that look really mischievous. But apparently, even though they have kind of like an unapproachable, mischievous nature to them, they're actually really kind and helpful, apparently. So that's kind of like a little fun fact that I learned. And I thought that was really cute. I feel like that's kind of like me. I feel like sometimes, from the outside, people are just like, they don't want to approach me. But then once they actually get to know me, they're like, oh, she's actually nice. So Labubu and I have something in common. All right. What is it? Oh my gosh. In my favorite color too. My favorite color is green. Green and black. Green and black are my favorite colors. But look at this little cutie. I got a green one. Look. Oh my goodness. It's so cute. And okay, so another reason that I fell into this Labubu trap is because I saw that there's people that make little clothes for them and things like that. And I thought that was just beyond adorable. And I loved the craftsmanship of like some of these little outfits. And I was just like, I need to get my hands on one so that I can kind of dress it up. And it'll just, I guess it'll start going everywhere with me. So what a little cutie. What a little cutie. And in my favorite color. I know, contrary to popular belief, because I do wear a lot of black and I love black, green is actually my favorite color. So that's adorable. Super, super excited about that. Excited to take this Labubu everywhere with me on all of my future adventures. All right, let's get into our ghost story. So I'm such a sucker for aesthetics and just like, when I see a pretty book, I just can't seem to help myself. So I found this book, and it's gorgeous. Look how shiny that is. It's like glistening. And it's just a book full of different ghost stories from really popular authors, and it's just a really nice compilation. So I'm really excited to kind of dive in. Let's go ahead and just read one of the stories from the book, shall we? But yeah, super, super pretty. I had to get my hands on this. I have this bad habit of buying books that look pretty before I finish any of my previous books. So I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's my life. All right, cool. Maybe we should start with the introduction and then we'll get right into our story for the day. All right. So here's our intro. Oh yeah, and Ghost says hi, of course. My sweet, sweet boy. Always loves hearing our stories together. All right. So intro. Apparitions, ghosts, spectral phenomenon. Whatever their chosen name, these almost inevitable beings have featured in literature for centuries and are still hugely popular today. While fictional and non-fictional ghost stories often carried with them a ritual of oral retelling, artists and writers have rendered these spirits in various ways. As a result, an array of spooks have been immortalized in films, paintings, and books. The 18th century saw the launch of the Gothic novel, a genre filled with mysterious settings, dark characters, and supernatural beings. A century later, the ghost became an even more prominent character, a fictional component that reflected the keen interest Victorian readers had in the paranormal. Included in this collection are some of the best and most chilling ghost stories ever published in Western literature. The tales on these pages will confront you with the uncanny, expose you to the most fearsome phantoms, and alarm you when you least expect it. Ghouls linger above old spires, the moonlight reveals terrifying faces that were once familiar, and abandoned castles and chateaus echo with unknown noises. Fear and fascination abound in these stories that will entrap you in haunted houses with strange beings that appear stuck in the liminal space between life and death. There are tales by a number of remarkable short story writers, including Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Louise Molesworth, and Ambrose Bierce Molesworth. The story of the rippling train commences when a group of friends, enjoying their first evening at a country house, settle down to share ghost stories. Reading this, readers will feel as if they too are sat among the friends as Uncle Paul tells the story of Maud, a love interest who died and returned as a ghost. The physical appearance of ghosts are integral to many of these classic ghost stories, which highlight the hideousness and otherworldliness of beings that are not always apparent to the eye. Filled with humor and horror, Mary Chamadlis, and I'm so sorry if I butchered your last name, Let Loose, shares a blood-curdling amount of the terrors unleashed when an architect ventures into a dark and decayed crypt of skeletons. This book also depicts the discomfort caused when faced with the uncanny, with the tales such as Poe's The Oval Portrait and Thomas Hardy's The Withered Arm. Ghosts may not appear in great detail in these stories, but both explore the eerie shadows and unexplained happenings that come from artistic obsession and supernatural intrigue. Also included are spine-tingling works by Edith Wharton, M.R. James, and Sheridan LaFanu. Each story reflects the differences in style and spellings that often exist between writers of different times and places. Take this ghoulish collection in your hands and pour your eyes over the chilling stories these respected writers devoted their ink to. Immerse yourself in the paranormal and see if you can summon up the courage to meet all the ghosts that wander among the shadows of flickering fireplaces, moonlit moors, and grand towers. Ooh, I like this. I like this book already. And I love that it's just like, a collection of some of the best ghost stories. So really excited to jump into this first one. This first one is going to be called The Oval Portrait by Edgar Allan Poe. I also want to show you some of the artwork too, because I think it's pretty cool. Just overall, just a beautiful book. So there's some of that. I love just intricate, detailed, like, art like that on pages. I love it. All right, The Oval Portrait by Edgar Allan Poe. The chateau into which my valet had ventured to make forcible entrance, rather than permit me, in my desperately wounded condition, to pass a night in the open air, was one of those piles of comingly gloom and grandeur which have so long frowned among the Apennines, not less in fact than in the fancy of Mrs. Radcliffe. To all appearance it had been temporarily and very lately abandoned. We established ourselves in one of the smallest and least sumptuously furnished apartments. It lay in a remote turret of the building. Its decorations were rich, yet tattered and antique. Its walls were hung with tapestry and bedecked with manifold and multiform armorial trophies, together with an unusually great number of very spirited modern paintings in frames of rich golden arabesque, and in these paintings, which depended from the walls, not only in their main surfaces, but in very many nooks, which the bizarre architecture of the chateau rendered necessary. In these paintings, my incipient delirium, perhaps, had caused me to take deep interest, so that I bade Pedro to close the heavy shutters of the room, since it was already night, to light the tongues of a tall candelabrum which stood by the head of my bed, and to throw open far and wide the fringed curtains of the black velvet which enveloped the bed itself. I wished all this done that I might resign myself, if not to sleep, at least alternatively to the contemplation of these pictures, and the perusal of a small volume which had been found upon the pillow, and which purported to criticize and describe them. Long, long I read, and devoutly I gazed, rapidly and gloriously. The hours flew by, and the deep midnight came. The position of the candelabrum displeased me, and outreaching my hand with difficulty, rather than disturb my slumbering valet, I placed it so as to throw its rays more fully upon the book. But the action produced an effect altogether unanticipated. The rays of the numerous candles, for there were many, now fell within a niche of the room, which had hitherto been thrown into deep shade by one of the bedposts. I thus saw in vivid light a picture all unnoticed before. It was the portrait of a young girl, just ripening into womanhood. I glanced at the painting hurriedly, and then closed my eyes. Why I did this was not at first apparent, even to my own perception. But while my lids remained thus shut, I ran over in my mind my reason for such shutting them. I was an impulsive movement to gain mind for thought. It was an impulsive movement to gain time for thought, to make sure that my vision had not deceived me, to calm and subdue my fancy for a more sober and more certain gaze. In a very few moments, I again looked fixedly at the painting. That I now saw aright, I could not and would not doubt, for the first flashing of the candles upon that canvas had seemed to dissipate the dreamy stupor which was stealing over my senses, and to startle me at once into waking life. The portrait, I had already said, was that of a young girl. It was a mere head and shoulders, done in what is technically termed a vignette manner, much in the style of the favorite heads of Sully. The arms, the bosom, and even the ends of the radiant hair melted imperceptibly into the vague yet deep shadow which formed the background of the whole. The frame was oval, richly gilded, and filigreed in Moresque. As a thing of art, nothing could be more admirable than the painting itself. But it could have been neither the execution of the work nor the immortal beauty of the countenance which had so suddenly and so vehemently moved me. Least of all could it have been that my fancy, shaken from its half-slumber, had mistaken the head for that of a living person. I saw at once that the peculiarities of the design, of the vignetting, and of the frame must have instantly dispelled such idea, must have prevented even its momentary entertainment. Thinking earnestly upon these points, I remained, for an hour perhaps, half sitting, half reclining, with my vision riveted upon the portrait. At length, satisfied with the true secret of its effect, I fell back within the bed. I had found the spell of the picture in an absolute life-likedness of expression, which at first, startling, finally confounded, subdued, and appalled me. With deep and reverent awe, I replaced the candelabrum in its former position. The cause of my deep agitation being thus shut from view, I sought eagerly the volume which discussed the paintings and their histories. Turning to the number which designated the oval portrait, I there read the vague and quaint words which follow. She was a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee. And evil was the hour when she saw and loved and wedded the painter. He was passionate, studious, austere, and having already a bride in his art. She a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee. All light and smiles, and frolicsome as the young fawn, loving and cherishing all things, hating only the art, which was her rival, dreading only the palette and brushes, and other untoward instruments which deprived her of the countenance of her lover. It was thus a terrible thing for this lady to hear the painter speak of his desire to betray even his young bride, but she was humble and obedient, and sat meekly for many weeks in the dark high turret chamber, where the light dripped upon the pale canvas only from overhead. But he, the painter, took glory in his work, which went on from hour to hour and from day to day. And he was a passionate and wild and moody man, who became lost in reveries, so that he would not see the light, which fell so ghastly in that lone turret, withered the health and the spirits of his bride, who pined visibly to all but him. Yet she smiled on and still on, uncomplainingly, because she saw that the painter, who had high renown, took a fevered and burning pleasure in his task, and wrought day and night to depict her, who so loved him, yet who grew daily more dispirited and weak. And in sooth, some who behold the portrait spoke of its resemblance in low words, as of a mighty marvel, and a proof not less of the power of the painter than of his deep love for her whom he depicted so surpassingly well. But at length, as the labor drew nearer to its conclusion, there were admitted none into the turret, for the painter had grown wild with the ardor of his work, and turned his eyes from the canvas rarely, even to regard the countenance of his wife, and he would not see that the tints which he spread upon the canvas were drawn from the cheeks of her who sat beside him. And when many weeks had passed, and but little remained to do, save one brush upon the mouth and one tint upon the eye, the spirit of the lady again flickered up as the flame within the socket of the lamp, and then the brush was given, and then the tint was placed, and for one moment the painter stood entranced before the work which he had wrought. But in the next, while he yet gazed, he grew tremulous and very pallid, and aghast, and crying with a loud voice, "This is indeed life itself!" Turned suddenly to regard his beloved. She was dead. Oh, Edgar Allan Poe always does it for me. That was a good one. Wow. I love stories like that, and I think it's because I'm just also a hopeless romantic. But that was great. So that was one of the stories from this book, and we'll continue on just because this book is so beautiful. And yeah, I'm excited to keep going with this series. I'm so happy to be back here. Let me know what you all have been up to in the comments. I hope you enjoyed my fun little Labubu unboxing, and I'm so excited to get back on track with this, and I'm hoping that we can kind of go on a little bit of an adventure soon. That's my plan. So we'll see what we've got in the future and what that holds for us. But thank you so much for spending some time with me today, letting me read to you, and I'll see you next time. Have a good evening.